based, whereas simulation is a real world application. So they would go together hand in hand.
Okay.
But not necessarily. You can have a simulation without a scenario, and you can have a scenario without a simulation.
Okay, very good. That's close, very close. Anybody else? Scenario has context around it, a story, a case. A, B, or C, you have choices. A scenario-based learning, you can have choices. Simulation, you can have choices. A, B, C. It's like a multiple choice test, essentially. Anybody else? Okay, well, a scenario is essentially a story where you're applying knowledge in two forms, a second person point of view or a third person point of view. And in both of those cases, you're applying knowledge for somebody else. So in a video, you're watching somebody else perform a process or process and behaviors, and you're making a choice for them. Whereas in a simulation, which what we call a person point of view, you're actually making a decision for yourself, and you're applying those process and behaviors to a situation, a scenario, a story. So you can have a scenario in a simulation, but a scenario isn't necessarily a simulation. Does that make sense to everybody? So in our world, in our L&D world, nomenclature is so important, and so I had to differentiate that for our staff at one point so that we could figure out, okay, are we creating a scenario here or a simulation? Are we creating first person point of view, second person point of view, or third person point of view? And one of the things I'm going to try to do is show you examples. Bear with me a second. 1 minute. Okay, so just to give you an example, this is something done for Ace Hardware, Helpful 101 Sales and Service Training. So we think of Ace Hardware as the helpful people, correct? So what does that mean? Well, it means something in a set of process and behaviors. So here we created a game. Sorry. It's hard to... So we created a game where essentially you're watching a 30-second video of a customer walking into the store with a door, a screen door that is broken. And essentially you're making a decision for this sales associate. And so do you help them take the door to the service counter? Do you tell them that the service counter is over there? Or do you radio somebody and say, hey, come by and pick up this door? What's the most helpful thing you could do?
Help her over to this.
Help her over there? Okay, anybody else?
Radio someone over.
Radio somebody over? So let's offer to take the door from them, and way to go. So once this is through, what we do is we show the rest of the scenario play out, so we then model that behavior for the learner. The problem here is that's where the scenario ends. There is no immersion here. It's good for applying knowledge, so you learn that you should take the customer over to the in-store services area and take their good or whatever they're getting fixed over there with them. You learn that, now you applied it, now what? You move on, right? So in a simulation, we have different characteristics in a simulation. We could be authentic, timely, efficient, fun, accessible, and emotive. Which ones ring true to you? Which elements of a simulation are the most compelling to you? Authentic, timely, efficient, relevant, fun, accessible, or emotive?
Efficient and relevant.
Efficient and relevant? Accessible? Authentic? Okay. Why accessible? I'm interested. Easy? Easy to go through? Okay. Why authentic?
I just think that you want them to feel like they really want to help you and not just that they are there because that's
Very good. What did you say?
Efficient and relevant.
Efficient and relevant. So, why did you pick efficient? What about efficient?
Efficient is important to be able to know the best way to do what you need to do.
In the shortest amount of time.
In the shortest amount of time.
Right. Okay. Good. So, in this case, the simulation is essentially a contrived experience. It's that story, and what we do is we allow the learner to interact as if it were real life. And just to go back to that, all of those characteristics are characteristics of a simulation. They need to be authentic. It needs to be as close to real life as possible. It needs to be timely. So what you want to do is you want to actually deploy that experience as close to when they're going to do it on the job as possible. So if you're going to train a sales associate to interact with customers, you don't do it 6 months before they're going to go out on the storeroom floor. You're going to do it as close to that moment as possible. You want it to be efficient, so we want to use as little of the learner's time as possible to get them to learn the training. So whatever the learning objectives are, we want to take as little time as possible. And if you stand up and you talk for 4 hours, or you could immerse them in that experience, that's what's more efficient. We want it to be relevant, so we only want to give them content that is applicable to the learning objectives. Everything else goes to a job aid. Everything else goes to social learning or some other format that allows the learner to interact with it. But when it comes down to two things, process and behaviors, or hard skills. So if it's behavioral or soft skills related, it's going to be behavior. If it's hard skills related, then it's going to be the set of steps or processes and the tools you use to get the job done, and in what order do you get them done. We want it to be fun. We want to create something in which they want to progress and move further, and sometimes that includes game mechanics. We want it to be accessible, so what that means is we want to remove all obstacles. So we want to get them through it as efficiently as possible, but also we don't want to hinder them from creating that authentic experience. Offering a next button or submit button every time you click a right answer or a wrong answer, it hinders you from moving on to an authentic experience. And we want it to be emotive. We want to create a moderate level of stress. So if you create that moderate level of stress, you're actually going to retain more information. So this is a first-person point of view. Simulation. So in this simulation, it's a series of video clips, okay? And this customer just walked into the store. And you have a choice to make. What can I help you find today? Can I help you? Or ignore the customer because they don't want to be bothered. What would you choose? What can I help you find today? Can I help you? Or ignore them because they don't want to be bothered. What's the most helpful response? A? Anybody else want to take B? Anybody else?
What I can help you find today. The open-ended one I care about.
What can I help you find today? is the right answer. Why?
It's an open-ended question, so it's not a yes or no.
Because it's not a yes or no. Very good. 80% of the time, retail associates say, can I help you? You must have retail experience.
Yeah, a lot of it, yes. I just say no and walk the other direction.
And 80% of the time, the customer says no. So the best way to open up that conversation is to say, what can I help you find today? Ignoring the customer is just not helpful, even though that's what I want. Sorry. So this is a set of process and behaviors at Ace Hardware. They have a sales process called SALES. Start the conversation, and the number one behavior in start the conversation is approach the customer and say, what can I help you find today? Home Depot is, what project are you working on today? So very similar approach, obviously competing companies, a very similar approach. I'm sure L Brands has the same thing, Target has the same thing. Bear with me, let me move forward a little bit. I should have done handouts. This is, if I do this again, I've learned.
Can we download this?
I'm sorry?
Can we download this presentation?
Yes, I don't have it up there yet, but I will send it, or I will upload it. So in order to create this, what is the best way to do it? And this is terrible because I've got 2 minutes left. In order to create this, we use an SME grid. The SME is the number one most important person in creating a simulation because they know what is authentic. They know what is relevant to creating that experience. So what we do is we prompt them by using the source material that is given to us as instructional designers. We use the source material to create a list of questions over here on the left-hand side. Those questions prompt the subject matter expert as to what question do you ask the customer when they walk in? What are plausible answers from the customer? What is good feedback to give? So in this situation, what can I help you find today? If you say, can I help you? A great feedback for that is 80% of the time, that is exactly what sales associates say, and 80% of the time, they actually say no, and you've ended the conversation before it even began. So that's good feedback. The only person who knows that is the subject matter expert. So it's very challenging to do that in a content download session where you're actually asking questions. So you want to come prepared to that with an SMA grid. And this template is available to you from us as well.
1 minute countdown.
In the rest of this presentation, we talk about storyboarding techniques. So how to color code, how to use conversational tone, when to use voiceover, when to use feedback. So when you are actually creating a simulation, don't provide feedback when the answer is correct. Move them on, because what you do is you kill the flow of the simulation. So these kind of tips are in here, and any questions?
How do you know they're just guessing then?
How do you know what?
They didn't guess. That's the right answer.
How do you know they didn't get? Oh, that's a very good point. And that is actually something that a lot of people have a problem with. However, if you provide the learner with summary afterwards, you're now giving them the information that they may have gotten wrong. But you're right, they can guess, absolutely. Eventually they're going to get one wrong. Depends on what kind of work environment you're in. A lot of times you might have that.
All right, everybody.
Great audience. I'm sorry I couldn't get through it all.
Yeah, look at
Holy moly.